Today's very welcome guest is Shannon Warner, a former classroom teacher, although she herself insists that once a teacher, always a teacher, with experience in two extremes, one urban and one very rural school. After 5 intense years, she became a classic case of teacher burnout, taking on too many responsibilities, caring too much about her students and their families, and not taking enough care of herself. Her next 8 years was working in the graphic apparel industry, but that really didn't match her passions. And so now, a mom of 2 girls herself, Shannon very joyfully is forming a business that's geared towards supporting career-oriented women like herself transition into motherhood. You're going to hear how Shannon learned so foundationally by an incredibly supportive and generous mentor-teacher, how the positive perspectives of that mentor affected not only her future relationships with her own students, but with their families as well. How her own classroom was largely influenced by Shannon's own belief that if we create a learning environment in which students have the opportunity for freedom, they thrive, and how she very reluctantly had to leave her classroom 5 years later as her overachieving tendencies led her to accepting far too many responsibilities that ultimately compromised her health. I think you're going to be mesmerized by Shannon's ability to verbally project her experiences and how she was able to form such productive and positive learning environments over her years in a rural charter school, creating learning environments that reflected her underlying philosophy, that the physical and emotional safety of her students comes first, and only then can we expect them to learn. You can find more conversations about education at all levels at Doodles with Donna, and activities that match virtually all methodologies at scaffoldingmagic.com. So now let's meet Shannon Warner, teacher extraordinaire and advocate for celebrating the whole child in the classroom. Welcome, Shannon. So, Shannon, what is your past in education? Let's start there.
Okay, so it was something I always thought I wanted to do, was to be a teacher. I feel like going back in time, I was always like, I will do that. That sounds like a lot of fun. For me, I always loved school. It was a very safe and warm place for me. So it was an easy career choice just to kind of follow that. So went to school, got the degree. I graduated right during the recession here in the States. So that was really hard. So I had to, kind of take side jobs for a year. And then I ended up moving to North Carolina and got the opportunity to teach in a brand new charter school in a rural community that had not had a school for 60 years. So it was a very interesting experience to be a brand new teacher and be thrown into that. But I take back nothing. Like, even though it ultimately led me to burnout, it was still a great experience. I taught there for 4.5 years. I left during my 5th year because I had a really hard time putting boundaries in place. And I was, a lot of teachers wear a lot of hats and do a lot of roles, but I was literally doing the job of 2 people because I had a position 1 year doing all of these things, kind of as like a support outside of the classroom role, doing test prep or handling the coordination of the tests that we would run 3 times a year. And then on top of other catch-all kind of things, and then they dropped me back into the classroom and I had to juggle all of it. And it was too much. And because we were a charter school with not a lot of funding, we were just expected to pick up all those pieces. And I really followed my intuition and nudges from the universe, and another job just kind of fell in my lap. So I took it and I left.
Okay, so before I ask you where you went to, what I'd like to know is about the charter school a little more, because I worked in a charter school as well. I became a teacher in New Mexico, and the charter school I went to was just a little bit in a different level than public school, but it wasn't an incredibly difficult environment to work in by any means. We had a lot of freedom, which is what attracted me to it. No, didn't attract me to it. It was the only school that accepted me at the time. So I was very, very happy. Right. I was in heaven, but really I didn't have anyone watching the curriculum, and I was able to do everything my own. And luckily I'm incredibly dedicated, but I also have a lot of, let's say, intuition. And I looked at my students' eyes and figured out what they needed, and I found that information. But there are a lot of different levels of charter schools. Can you explain to us the type of charter school that you were teaching?
Yeah. So this was part of a larger charter school network, and they called themselves a classical academy, which was a little intimidating to me because I didn't know what that meant. And I went to a public school with, a college kind of prep curriculum, and I didn't know what this classical curriculum entailed. And then I got into it, and it was really exciting what we were presenting to children starting in kindergarten and first grade. I taught second grade the first few years I was there. And, we were talking about world religions, and we were talking about Greek mythology and things that honestly I was not interested in at all. But then I started to teach it, and my kids were picking it up, and they were enjoying it, and it was so fun for them, and it made it fun for me. But I will say we did have a lot of freedom. Here's your curriculum. We're following this curriculum. We didn't have a lot of resources, so we had to get really creative. Sometimes we didn't have textbooks. We really, really had to be resourceful. But as long as you were getting it done, and as long as the state test scores show that you were getting your children to learn and to meet, I hate to say it, but it's a fact of life here in the States. As long as your children were showing progress, like they were happy with you. So I did appreciate the freedom. And that was why I was hesitant to leave and go to a public school, was because the pieces that I loved, I did not think I would be able to find somewhere else.
And some of the pieces that you loved were a little bit of freedom with curriculum, right?
Yeah. And basically, I feel like the administrator that we had in the beginning, she got a feel very quickly for who was kind of a natural at it. And I'm grateful that I did fall into a really good rhythm really quickly. I credit a lot of that to, I had a fantastic student teaching experience with an amazing mentor teacher. So she helped me build a really great foundation to build off of in my own classroom. So I think, early on in the observations, there was a lot of new teachers. So our admin would pop in a lot, but I think she could tell pretty quickly, like, okay, this person has their classroom under control. Good things are happening over here. I'm going to kind of step back. And I do appreciate that. So that was a lot of fun to be able to have your working off of intuition, have your lesson plan, and then go, wait a minute, let me set this down for a minute. Let's see where we could take this. Because, one of your students will start, wait, I have a question about this. Okay, let's go down that rabbit hole. That sounds like fun. Let's do that. Those were my favorite lessons, actually, when I was able to set down the plan and just really dive into where they were at and what they were excited about.
Okay, and part of being in a charter school meant that you could do that, because in the public school, that's not just frowned on, it's just you're usually not allowed to do that. Is that correct?
I never ended up teaching in a public besides where I did my student teaching, and where I did my student teaching, it was very much every second grade class this week needs to be focused on this thing, and then needs to be focused on this thing. And we were able to take some liberties. So that was really fun. And I worked alongside, there was one other section of second grade. And so we did some planning together, but sometimes we'd each go off on our own tangents. And it was really fun to kind of see where it took us. Yeah. Having the liberty, as long as the objectives at the end of the day were getting met, that's really what mattered. How you arrived there was up to you.
Okay, so that's a huge, I don't think you realize it, because I live in Spain. I think you know that. And in Spain, we do not have, teachers, I have taught here, but I taught in an American school. So I still had more freedom than most Spanish teachers in Spain. In Spain, you have a curriculum and you need to abide by it. There's virtually no homeschooling in Spain. So what I mean is there are dictates and you follow them, or you don't have a job. And it's unfortunate, because if you do have a certain amount of intuition, it means that you're going to be jumping from either the units or not using books, and parents have paid for books. And there's all these elements that you're probably very familiar with. I do have a really important question about mentor teachers, because you're saying that you had a teacher who was a fabulous mentor for you even before you went into the classroom. And I'm fascinated by that, because my mentor teacher, she was a lovely person, but she was about to get married into this big gala wedding. And she gave me no advice about the classroom, a lot about being a classic bride. So I went into the classroom with very little knowledge. And I tell you this because to me, it was a benefit, because I learned by myself. I learned what worked and what didn't work. In the charter school I worked in, books were not allowed. So again, I needed to create the whole curriculum by myself. For me, that meant that my creativity could just blossom. If I had gone into another school where I wasn't allowed to have that freedom, I would have had big problems. I'm not the type of person that can follow rules for absolutely no reason. My question for you is, having a mentor teacher that was so powerful even before you went into the classroom, how did she help you sort of formulate your ideas in being a teacher? And did you have another mentor teacher your first or second year in the charter school?
Yes. So a little backstory, I was nominated without my knowing to be placed into an urban school setting. And it was really not something I was super passionate about, I did not ever see myself as a great fit for that environment. I'm not from an environment. From an upper middle class, community. And not that I didn't think I couldn't serve those students. I just thought that there were other people better fit for that environment. And I got my placement and they were like, if you have any questions, call your advisor. Here's their number. And I called her immediately. And I was like, I didn't sign up for the urban program. I don't know why I was placed here. And because a lot of people really wanted that. And you had to have certain, criteria and grades and what have you to even be accepted. And she said, nope, somebody nominated you. You're a good fit. You're in, you're going. I was like, oh, okay. So trying to trust the universe, I was like, all right, there's some reason. I don't know who nominated me or who decided that this is where I need to be, but I'm going to ride it out. And so I went, and I think one of the most important things she taught me was just management of your classroom, because without that, you don't have anything. And sometimes those kids can be really tricky. They've got a lot going on in their home lives a lot of times. I had a little girl one morning come in, her dad had just been arrested, and then trying to navigate that. And then she showed me how to build partnerships with the parents. That was so, so important, and trying to make an active effort to really connect. And, a lot of those families, parents have to work these odd shifts and it's hard to get them in. So if you can't get them in to physically meet with them, you get them on the phone, trying to make those connections, being outside when they had it worked out where you'd have coverage for your class and you could go outside and let your greet your students and catch those parents as they're coming in, and just really watching the way that she made it a point to manage her classroom very, very well, so that it was a safe place with expectations in place for students to learn and to connect with the parents. And one thing she told me, I remember I had to, sit in on conferences, and she said, and I didn't realize later what a metaphor it was, but she said, I always sit on the same side of the table at conferences. I don't sit across from them. I sit on the same side of the table because I want them to know, I'm working with them. But it's such a metaphor. Like, we are sitting on the same side of the table with them. We are a team with them. So those things, she was just phenomenal. She had many, many years under her belt at that point. So I learned a lot from her. But I think those are the biggest things that I could carry into my experience as a teacher on my own. And then once you've got the management and the parent relationship piece in place, like, a lot of it comes together a lot more easily. And then I was blessed with this amazing co-teacher who had been, I think by the time I left the school, she had 40 years under her belt, and she was fantastic. She was just, we called her a unicorn. She's amazing. There's a lot of new teachers on her hall, and she was there for everybody, and she would root you on, and she was just so inspiring and encouraging. And, she would listen if you needed an ear, or if you had an uncomfortable topic to approach with a parent, she'd sit in with you and help you have the conversation. She was amazing. Those teachers, I couldn't have done it without their support.
Okay, and I'm fascinated by the fact there are two huge issues there that you're pointing out about your mentor teacher, the classroom management, and you were talking about classroom behavior, basically, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And the second one is dealing with parents, because in the best case scenarios, if the parents are on board and we can work with them and they feel valued and they feel involved in the classroom, everyone moves forward more solidly and more fluidly. It's challenging. There are really challenging parents out there, you probably know, which is why I also find that your co-teacher, what an incredible support system, having someone in there with you, just emotionally supporting you. And it helps a lot of potentially explosive situations really dissolve. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I think because, when you're a new teacher, there's different perceptions. Some parents are excited because you may come in with fresh ideas and you're young and energetic, while other parents are going, uh-oh, you don't have any experience. Like, my babies are your experiment here. So having her as some backup sometimes was really great, especially, she was just there a lot of times to echo what I was saying and help drive home the point and maybe say it in another way. And they were like, okay, like, between the two of you, I'm really hearing this. And that was so, so helpful.
What did you find that parents most wanted from you?
Oh, that's a good question. It's interesting. In the charter school, because the school hadn't had a community in 60 years, we had a lot of parents who chose to homeschool because the next school required like a 3-hour bus journey. It was like an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon. So the parents didn't want to subject their kids to it. So we had a lot of parents who had a lot of need. and didn't know how to articulate the need because they had been trying to homeschool their children and probably were not the best people to be doing it, but I understand why they did. So we had that. We also had a lot of parents who they were not thrilled with their public school experience. So they came to us looking for an upgraded experience, something where their child's needs would be met better or in a different way. So we had a lot of parents who wanted to be really, really involved and really wanted to know what was going on, wanted to talk to you all the time. I think it was just connection, but it was different needs for the connection.
So you're saying that with the most, what they wanted from you was a connection. Were most of them appropriate about asking for this connection, or did you find that some were a bit aggressive?
No, I would say most of them were very appropriate. They just wanted to know that they were on the right track and that you were there to support them and help them advocate for their own kid because their needs, especially these ones that were like, this was not good for me over here. I'm coming to you hoping for a better solution. Yeah, it was largely positive experiences with the parents.
Okay, I'm awfully glad to hear that. I mean, parents can be really challenging. And I left a few schools because I wanted to be teaching. And I found that I was so challenged by the attitude of the parents. Unfortunately, they were looking for someone to help them straighten out their own lives. And they felt that the person that they could most easily confront, and it was a confrontation, it wasn't just speaking with them, was the teacher. And that has to do with the attitude of teachers in different states, but it really does have to do with the state. Would you agree?
Yes. North Carolina is interesting. I mean, I grew up in Michigan and did my teacher prep here in Michigan, and I feel like the rules are a little different down there. And I feel like teachers are valued a little less down there, and it's very apparent in the way they pay their teachers. I feel like the respect level is a little different. So yeah, I may have had a different experience here if I had stayed and taught here, but it's all I know. That's all. It's the experience I had is all I know.
Okay, well, I'm trying to sort of delve into the subject a little bit because one of the factors that I want for this podcast is for parents to understand a little bit of what goes on to the classroom and for teachers to know a little bit about what the parents may be thinking. And so it's going to be beneficial for both. The other element that I find fascinating about your mentor teacher in the urban school was the classroom management. Do you know if she consciously taught you positive reinforcement and creating norms and consequences for the classroom?
Yeah, very much so. She was very deliberate in what she did. And then she would sit down with me after and go, okay, do you know why I handled this particular situation the way that I did? A lot of these, she had taught in the school so long that she was very familiar with a lot of these families. And she was very in tune with some of the needs that some of these kids had because she had had their siblings, and had contact with the parents before. And, handling things in an equitable way. But sometimes the consequence for one did not mirror the consequence for another because this child had something else going on that day. And we were going to address it in a way that was appropriate to their needs at that time. And really just kind of recalibrating minute by minute based on what the needs of the students were, but also upholding a level of expectation of we're learners, we're here to learn, you can do this, I'm going to support you, but I do expect that you're going to show up and behave in a way that will allow you to do so.
Okay, so what you're saying is really the fundamental principle of norms and consequences is to create a learning environment, and it's not to create just rules just for the sake of having rules. Is that what you would say?
Right. Yeah, and she really taught me too. I don't remember how it came up with classroom rules, but I always thought it was like, here are our 15 rules that we follow as a class. And she narrowed it down to me, and I carried this into my own classroom. Be safe, be respectful, be responsible. And it covers everything. And it gives so many opportunities to talk about, is this a safe behavior? Yes or no? Why or why not? Are we being responsible? Are we being respectful? What does it look like to be respectful? We're walking down the hall or when dealing with another classmate or when sharing math manipulatives, just lots of learning opportunities and having these kind of overarching rules, but then it's all encompassing. And then when something happens, you're not going, oh no, I didn't have a rule for that. Oh, what's my consequence? Because I don't have a rule for that one. Yeah.
One of the things that I do in workshops here is I devote whole workshops on classroom management, and I call them norms and consequences. And I make a big point of not calling them rules and punishments because there are no punishments. There are consequences that the students will have agreed on. So we co-create the norms and consequences. Yes. And like you're saying, they need to be, I think I have 6 or 7. So I have maybe double what she does. But goodness, those 3 that you're talking about, or the 6 that I do, are really all encompassing. But the element that I find so important is to co-create them, even with the youngest learners. So I'm wondering if that's something that you both did as well.
I don't know if she did or not. I think there was a lot of groundwork laid in her classroom, for the first, I think the focus for her, even the first month, was just really laying the groundwork around the rules and how the classroom would run and her expectations. And I tried to do a lot of the same thing. And I really made it a point with my experience with my second graders to talk through everything. This is why we do this. This is why this is the way it is. And we did talk about different rules and things that maybe they had experienced in other grades and what kind of rules would they think would lead to a safe classroom, and then kind of grouped them under, hey, this would be under being safe, not rocking back in your chair, that would be not being safe. We want safe behaviors. And we don't hit our classmates. Well, we're not being respectful. We're not being safe or respectful, and showing them how all of those things that they're thinking that would create a safe classroom environment for them fall under these overarching categories that are a little easier to remember than the 10 or 15 rules that your teacher has plastered on the wall.
Okay, so what you're saying, what I think I hear you saying, is that it's really important. It's not just sort of a lark. You don't talk about the rules or the norms and consequences on the first day and expect the students to follow them. It needs to be part of the daily routine, at least for the first few months of school, correct?
Yes. Yeah. We used to have a little saying, and I can't remember what it was. It was this little thing we'd recite in the mornings just to kind of get warmed up and in our seats and ready to learn. And I actually got it from my mentor, Kathy. It was like a responsibility pledge, and I can't remember the words, but it was like, I'm bigger now, I'm responsible now, I'm in charge of myself. And we started our mornings that way. And it was just like the reminder, like, I'm here, I'm ready to learn, I'm capable, I am responsible, and I can do this. That's how we started every morning.
Do you have any idea if the students that came out of your classes and the students that came out of your mentor teachers' classes had a different attitude than those that came out of different teachers' classes who didn't have the same attitude?
It's a good question. I don't really know to say for certain. I will say that I ended up teaching my former second graders in fourth grade one year. I ended up being like the breakout language arts teacher. And there was a contrast between the students who had been under myself and my co-teacher and the students who hadn't. And I don't know if it was because it was me again, and they were like, oh, I'm in her classroom, I know she's got these expectations of me, I remember this from a couple years ago. I can't say for certain, but I would like to think that their experience with me or with my co-teacher maybe set them up to act more responsibly and find more success in the classroom.
Okay, I'm going to say absolutely. I'm going to say absolutely. That was the effect. That's what we want.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how is it going into the charter school? And again, I'm going to ask you this question. You had this very strong co-teacher and mentor teacher. Did you have other teachers that you could depend on when you went into your first year teaching? And how was that experience?
It was interesting being a brand new school and having a low budget. So brand new teachers were appealing because we were cheap and there was a lot of us. And our school started, I can't remember. It grew to K-12, and I can't remember if we started K through 7th grade or K through 8th grade that first year. But we were broken into 3 separate buildings, and the lower elementary building was K through 2nd grade. And that hallway of women they're some of my favorite people on the planet to this day, even though we haven't worked together in a long time. There was my co-teacher who had, 30 plus years under her belt. And then there was another teacher who had, I think maybe 6 or 7 years under her belt. And the rest of us were brand new. But we had such an amazing environment, and I still get all jazzed up when I talk about it because we were just there and we knew that we were up to the task, and we knew that we had a lot in front of us, having to be resourceful and start this new school. And I'll use this as an example. Our administration had more experience with higher grades. So they were trying to implement things that when they came to the K2 building didn't make any sense for our students. Like, we're not going to apply the same consequences to a first grader that hits a classmate to a 6th grader that hits a classmate. Those are 2 different things, So we see your rules, admin, and we're going to adapt them for the needs of our little building here. And because we were we were in our own, they were modular buildings, because we were literally in our own building. It was kind of like we had formed our own little separate school for our early elementary kids. And it was amazing because we were all on the same page. We'd have these building meetings. Hey, this is coming down the chute. How do we feel about this? How can we adapt this for the needs of the kids in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade? Because what they're doing over there does not work over here with the little ones. So all of those teachers, so amazing. We really just rallied together and supported one another. And it was such a unique experience, and I would not trade it for the world.
Do you remember what the methodology was that you used, if you used the term methodology? And if not, can you tell me what choices you made in methods that in the teaching or I would say I'm reluctant to use the word teaching because my focus is on the students learning. So I walk into the classroom with materials to help my students learn. And if I go into the classroom to teach, it's a completely different dynamic. So I'm wondering what your thinking is on this.
So I wouldn't say that I had like adhered to one specific methodology. My goal first was the students and making sure that they were safe and they felt safe in my classroom and cared for, and then caring about them as a child first and building that foundation. Because if those things aren't happening, they're not learning. You know, a lot of these kids in either environment had things going on at home, and they would come to school and they weren't ready to learn because their little home life was exploding for whatever reason. So first, that was my number one. We need to handle that right away at the beginning of the day and set the tone that everyone feels safe and secure so that we can learn from there. And then I think it depended on what I was doing. I really like to incorporate movement. I thought movement was really important. It was really important for me as a kid. It still is. So I wouldn't say that I adhered to one specific methodology. And because we had the flexibility and freedom to teach kind of how we wanted, you know, sometimes you would come into my classroom and we're all up and moving and jumping around and doing jumping jacks and counting and whatever. Sometimes they're all laying on the floor and working quietly, and I'm over here working with a group doing differentiated instruction, or sometimes we're playing a game. And it was just kind of like getting to know my students. And I was very fortunate. I had very small class sizes, so it was easy enough to do that. And then really get a feel for them and how I could convey this material in a way that would best meet their needs overall.
Did you have all the students doing the same thing at the same time, or did they have a bit of freedom in when they were learning and the rhythm and the time factors?
I mean, we were definitely working within the parameter. I mean, a lot of our lessons were a whole group, and then we would break out. You know, we would learn the material together, and then I would pull a small group, and this group over here would be working on these skills, and I would set this group over here to be doing some independent work. I tried to do, I guess we would call it centers. They weren't like dedicated centers, but we would say group A is here doing this activity. Group B is over here doing I hate worksheets, but occasionally a worksheet works. You know, they're doing the worksheet that goes along with the lesson, and then I'm working with a small group, and then we'll rotate. And that's what I liked to do where I could. I couldn't always do it with everything, but where I could, that's what I like to do. And giving the kids kind of their space, you know, just that you don't need to be in your seat. If you work better on the floor, go sit on the floor. Or, you know, if you need a few quiet minutes and you can be in the hallway with a partner doing buddy reading or whatever, just kind of giving them the freedom and watching them, especially when they're, you know, 7 years old. A lot of times, and I think it's better now, but then a lot of these kids came from all of the kids besides the homeschool kids came from the public school. And it's interesting to see them kind of interact with the freedom, because I don't think they had it in their previous learning environment. They're like, wait a minute, you're going to let me go sit over here by myself and you're going to trust me? Yeah, I'm going to trust you until you give me a reason not to. And then we'll recalibrate.
Okay, so I don't know if you realize how important it is what you're saying, because again, I'm in Spain, and in Spain, the teaching is very traditional. And what I mean by that is that in preschool, Shannon, the students sit in desks, and in preschool, they have books. I know. Yeah. And they have books. And I realized listening to you talk that I have become a little too desensitized to it, even though it's horrifying when I walk into the classroom and all they're doing is working on worksheets or they're opening the books. And my job is to help the teachers reconsider and try to move more movement. And I give whole workshops on the fact that the human body needs to move to learn. The blood needs to be going. The brain needs to be receiving information from the entire body. And it sounds like you intuitively knew that. Is that something that you learned from other teachers? Is that what other teachers in your building were doing? Or is that something you just intuitively moved into?
I would say I intuitively moved into it, and then watching the teachers around me doing similar things really encouraged me to continue. And even, you know, oh, I really like what they were doing with that over there. I'm going to try that, you know, because when I came from my program here in Michigan, I feel like I was taught very much, here are the rules. You follow the rules. This is the expectation of you as an educator. This is what the state of Michigan expects you to do in the public schools. This is what it looks like. And then I got down there and had a lot more freedom. As long as I was showing up and my students were learning and they were safe, and, you know, not hanging from the rafters of the building, like I was left alone. So that was like, wow, okay, let's kind of find a groove that works for us. And then having a co-teacher who very much supported me in that. And we decided early on, she said, I really love teaching science. And I said, I really love teaching social studies. And we decided to switch classes. So she would take my students for science. I would take hers for social studies, and just really having the space to experiment with that. And admin who was just like, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so again, you're reminding me that I'm very careful about not idealizing the education in the States here. It really does depend on the state. It depends on the school, the district. It depends on the type of school. So yes. My most impactful experience was in the charter school. And as I was told you, I had a lot of freedom. But what I do want Spanish teachers to hear from you, if they listen to this, is that 7-year-olds can handle independence if we let them, and they have the opportunity. So yes. Can you give us a couple of examples of true independence from your 7-year-olds and the opportunities that you daily gave them?
I'm digging in the way back machine. I've been out of the classroom for 8 years. I think first and foremost, you have to model it for them because they don't always know what it looks like. So for reading, for example, this is what we're going to do. And I always had like a list on the board of we're working independently during this time. This is what it could look like. This is what we're aiming to have completed by the end of this time period before we go to music. We need this done. Then I would like you working on this. And then you've got choices. And then empowering them in those choices and encouraging them to realize, if you didn't sleep so well last night, then maybe laying on the floor reading a book may not be the best choice today. And just simple choices, but allowing them to have the autonomy over how they would spend their time once they got the necessary stuff out of the way. And I did that in a lot of my blocks during little social studies time, or we did a lot of cross-curricular, and it's hard to just talk about the blocks because there was a lot of overlap. But, we had time periods that we had to work within. And, hey, when you're done with this part that has to be done, here are your choices. And how are we going to make a good choice today? What does that look like for you today? And sometimes you might need some reminders, and I may need to redirect you. And maybe the choice that you made today isn't the best choice for you today. Let's go over here and try this instead. And I'm really lucky because I had a really small class. I think one year I had 12 students. I think the other year I had 14 or 15. So it was a lot easier to manage that. I know it can be trickier when you get into larger numbers. And I don't know what the numbers are like over there in Spain. I don't know if they're as big as...
They're big.
Big. Yeah. But I think some of it too is also teaching them to recognize a good learning partner. Like, oh, you know what? I could use a little bit of work with this. And I really encourage them to do the ask 3 before me, and give them, where they would raise their hand and I would just give them a nod, and they would okay, who do I think could help me in this? I know this student is really good in math. I'm going to go talk to them about that. And then teaching them, we're not giving them the answers. We're going to work with our classmate through this. And then just giving another opportunity for collaboration. As adults, how often do we have to work completely by ourselves and complete a task and turn in a task? It doesn't happen very often that way. And we're allowed to collaborate, and we're allowed to seek answers from people who may know more than us. So trying to instill that early was important, but also from a management perspective. So then I could pull my small group and find some more uninterrupted time, because I had these systems in place where kids knew, I can ask this person over here because they're really good in this area. And if they don't know, then maybe this person knows, and I can get some help before I go straight to the teacher.
Okay, and this also has to do with you being willing to let them ask other people before you. In other words, you were not the source of all knowledge, and you didn't model that. Right. It's very important. The other thing I'm noticing is that you actually have written objectives on the board and let them choose between these are the objectives they need to finish by a certain period of time, but they have the choice on when and how they finish them, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the beginning, it looks a little different. A little bit, at the beginning, they're little. They're little anyway, but at the beginning of 2nd grade, they're very little. And you're like, okay, this is the order, that we're going to do these things. And then the last number 3 item was more of a free space to operate within. But then I had really great groups of kids. I'm very, very fortunate, and they could handle it. And as the year did go on through both of those years that I taught 2nd grade, to give them more freedom was the option. And they ran with it. They handled it very, very well.
All right. And then I do want to go into you said you did go into public school afterwards, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I was afraid to. I did my internship at the public school.
Okay. So I want to just go back to the numbers in the classes, because I'm not sure if you're aware, the studies show that how you treat a class of 12 is the same way you treat a class of 30, and vice versa. The dynamic that you establish with a class of 30 7-year-olds is the same as if half of them or 3/4 of them leave. And I say that because teachers love to say, my class is too big, I cannot give them independence. Or my class is too big, I can't give them choices about the rules. Or my class is too big, I can't let them work in groups. There's chaos. They don't know what to do. And what you're saying is that your priority was to teach them agency, was to give them the skills that they're going to need outside the classroom, even though they're 7 years old. This will become a foundation in their bodies, not just their minds, right?
Yes. And to think critically, like, what am I going to do next? And sometimes you've got kids who are going to put their head down on the desk and then you have a conversation about it, but it's not a punitive, like, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. It was whenever I had the opportunity to, like, let's think through what we did here. And I think that piece, because I had a smaller class, was easier to do because I had more time with them individually to do that if I needed to. If I needed to have that same conversation 3 times as often, it would have been more challenging with the confines of the time of your day.
Okay, so this is really interesting because I was just speaking with another person. She's doing her dissertation on the socio-emotional impact on teaching. And the whole thesis is about the fact that we assume that teachers go into the classroom having a pretty strong emotional foundation. If we do, and if we become very compassionate to our students, we need to find the time to sort of implement that compassion. Many times, and again, you're fortunate in that you were working in a charter school. It seems I was working in a charter school. In the public school, we don't have as much freedom to be compassionate, literally to show that compassion, because we have a list of things we need to do, and that's not the priority for the administration. Have you found that? Is that something that you were aware of?
I would say in my student teaching experience, and I was able to spend a whole year there. Sometimes you only have a semester, but because you were in an urban program, they wanted you in there the whole year because they knew the connections with the kids were really important, and the kids benefited from the experience with you as much as you did from being in the classroom with them. And I know admin was very tough, and I imagine they were probably getting the heat from the central office, from the board for the district, because it was a very large district. But I remember when I was planning lessons, my mentor teacher, Kathy, would be like, do not do a coloring worksheet. It will not be well received. It needs to be very clearly connected to the objective that's written on the board. And if it's math time from this time to this time, like, you have to be doing math during this block. Do not spill over. If the principal walks in at this time, she wants to see math. She wants to be very evident that you're doing math, that you're meeting those objectives, and that you're not coloring just for fun. Or even if it was tied to the lesson, like, even coloring was discouraged because I think it was seen as like a waste of time, which is so sad with especially second graders. But just a lot of intensity on, there wasn't time to take a pause and go, you know what, this isn't working. Let's set this down and let's try a different approach today, because everyone was supposed to be doing the same thing at the same time, from one class in one grade level to the next class in the same grade level. It was supposed to look almost like a mirror image. You do math from this time, and you're teaching this objective 2.1 on this standard today. And it's like, where's the time? Where's the time to pause and connect? And I remember times where things were going on when I was teaching, and I was like, this is not working. This is not working. We're going to set this down and come back to this. Let's have kind of a class meeting and like, what's going on in our dynamic today, and how can we address it? And maybe we need to pause for a minute and go take a walk and get some fresh air, and then come back and regroup. And I know that was absolutely not okay where I did my student teaching. And I understand to some extent, but I don't agree with it.
Okay, and so what it sounds like also, at least in the charter school, that you were able to follow the rhythm of your students and really address the fact that maybe they needed some sitting down at that point. Maybe they needed a little more movement at another point that wasn't necessarily added to the curriculum, but it's something that you could see in their eyes they needed to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my question for you right now, you worked in the urban environment, you worked in a rural environment. What do you think is one of the big misconceptions between how parents see education and what's really happening in the school?
I think in the urban environment, I think teachers are viewed as like separate people that are not like on a different level, but not seen in a positive way. I think a lot of times there are things going on in the homes that as mandated reporters, you have to get involved in for the sake and the safety of the child. But just holding that you are on their team. You both want what's best for their child, and just holding that space for those parents and building that relationship to reiterate that I'm here for you and I'm here for your child, and I am accessible to both of you when you need me, and just holding the space to be available. And they would do a lot of events just at the school for the purpose of bringing the families in and connecting and getting them involved and having literacy nights, and here's how you can work with your child on those things. It had a certain feel to it. Whereas in the rural environment, it was interesting, like I said, because it was a new school and we were trying to build our student count. So that experience when we had events felt more like marketing campaigns, get out there and put your best self out. And, it was for our local parents, but it was also an opportunity to bring in potential new families. And it felt more like a marketing campaign than a true show of what our school was really about.
Did you, in either of the schools, do newsletters to inform parents about what was going on in the classroom, things like that?
So I don't think it happened too much in the urban school. Now, this was in the 2008 or 9, I was there. So I think even then, even like sending emails was still kind of a newer concept. I don't think that happened in that classroom. That was not something that I did with her. In my own classroom, I did. I always was sending home something. I think the first year I did hard copy, and the second year I did like email blasts. I tried to send out something every week. And then of course things would come up during the week and I would send information out as needed. But I wanted them to know what we were doing. I wanted them to know what was going on. I wanted to remind them that they can reach out to me at any time, that I'm available. Yeah, just keeping the lines of communication as open as possible.
All right. So one thing I'm really trying to focus on is helping parents see that there's so much going on in a teacher's lives. And usually they have their best intentions for these parents' children. There are stereotypes. There are stereotypes in all realms of society. But in my experience, the teachers I know are incredibly dedicated. They do their best for their students. Why did you finally leave the classroom? And what would you want parents to know about why you left and why you would have wanted to stay or go back?
Largely, my experiences with parents in my own classroom were positive. There's always a few. And even those parents, if you can get them in and talk face to face, because I think over the phone, people can still be ready to come at you with some aggression. But when they see you face to face as a human, it kind of takes the heat off. Not always, but a lot of the times. So most of my interactions with parents were positive. There were a few that were not, but I didn't leave because of them, and I didn't leave because of the kids. I left because I did not stand up for myself, and I did not have great boundaries in place. And we had some shifts in administration. A lot was happening in the few years that I was there, and I was fearful for my own health. At that point, I was working way too many hours. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was facing burnout. I was trying to juggle all the things and not doing a great job. And it was stealing my love and my passion for what was actually going on in my classroom. Because while I had to do that, I had to do all these other things as well. And I just could not sustain it. And like I said, when this opportunity kind of fell in my lap, I took it as a sign, and it allowed me to leave right at Christmas break too. It just lined up, and I'm like, I'm not going to ignore, this little nudge from the universe, and this is time, and I'm going to step away now.
All right, so Shannon,
it was the extra. It wasn't the students. It wasn't the parents. It was all of the extra.
It was just taking on too much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you have 2 daughters now. How old are your daughters?
6 and 16 months.
Wow. There are 2 questions here. First of all, what type of school do they go into, and how do you supplement their education at home?
Oh, good question. So the little one is in a private daycare. Our 6-year-old is in kindergarten this year, finishing up. She was in a public preschool that was associated with the school district last year. We just moved to this area a couple years ago, and one of the main reasons we chose this area is because they have good schools. And I know public education gets a lot of heat, but it's something that I think is still really important. And it was really important to me that wherever we chose to live, because we moved back from North Carolina to Michigan, was someplace with really, really solid schools. And so it's been a great experience for my kindergartner, and it's been interesting to navigate as a former teacher, seeing what it's like on the other side. And I think I'm almost overcompensate. I think I approach the teacher with things like, I've noticed this about her. Do you see this? Are you worried about this? And she's handled me so well. And I haven't told her that I used to teach because I don't think it's pertinent information, and I don't want her to get any kind of feeling about me. But I think I do overanalyze things that my daughter's doing. She's got a bit of a speech impairment right now. And I'm like, are we worried about this? Are we worried about this? Are we worried about this? I'm seeing this. Are you seeing this? And she's like, no, she's fine. She's right on. She's right on the levels. Don't worry about it. I'll keep watching her. So it has been interesting being on the other side, but I'm really thrilled with her experience so far. I think her teacher's really great. I think her teacher's really great at, hey, this is what we're working on this week in this area, and here's how you can support them at home. So for us, it looks like a lot of reading and then incorporating. My daughter loves to play school, so she's easy. She's easy to she's happy to sit down and read the little Bob books with me and then answer questions about what she read and then let's draw on the whiteboard. So she's easy. I don't know how my youngest one will be, but right now it's really easy to supplement her education because she just loves it so much and loves to play school and thinks that we're playing school all the time.
So do you do things to intentionally include them in your daily routine and the housework, for instance, or in your daily shopping areas? In other words, including math in your shopping, including categorization and washing dishes, for instance, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, not as much. I could do more. I could definitely do more because with our littlest one now, who is walking and running and getting into all the things, sometimes it's easier to take care of these tasks when they're not home. So I do some of the things while I'm not home, or while they're not home. But yeah, it is, putting toys away. We're going to put the balls in this category and we're going to do this over here and sorting the play area. Okay, let's put all the Barbies here and let's put these things here. And with the dishes, I didn't think about it that way, but my older one unloads the dishwasher most mornings before she goes to school. And there is, sorting and categorization in that. And I will say, I didn't realize how easy it would be, even when she was younger, to do basic things like, hey, I've got 6 cookies here. How are we going to share these? How can we both share these in a way that's fair to both of us? And doing these math concepts, and I think she was 3 when we started that. And I was like, okay, let me take that a little step further and a step further. And I was amazed at how far, down that path I was able to get with her. And she just thought we were playing, but I was like, oh, yes, this feels so good. And had I not been an educator, I don't know that I would have thought to do that.
So there's something that parents definitely need to be aware of. I was just going to ask you, and I don't want there to be judgment on this. I was going to ask you if you consciously keep them away from screens.
Do I consciously? I don't. It's not something that I don't want there to be a stigma around it. We don't watch a ton of TV, but sometimes we'll put something on. The little one isn't, unless the TV's on in the background and she's in the room, but we're not handing her a tablet. We're not handing her a phone, although she's very interested in them and will try to steal one from you because they're watching. They're always watching. But if we are handing the 6-year-old a tablet, it's because she's doing ABC Mouse or specific learning activity. Now we do let her watch movies and things, and it shows here and there, but we're trying to be mindful about how much time she is spending in front of the screen. In Michigan in the winter, it's hard. Sometimes it's more time than we would like, but now that it's nice, we're like, nope, go outside. You need to be out there, go play.
Okay, so this is wonderful. And I realize the time is absolutely flown and I want to be respectful. I know. Can you believe it?
I'm good.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions that could be the last questions. We'll see where they lead. I love to end on what if questions. So I'm going to ask you 2 because you've been an educator and you're a parent. The what if question is, if you had your own school, what would be 3 of the most important elements you would want the teachers to follow?
I think first, if I had my own school and we were not subject to all the things of state regulations and testing, I would really, really, really love if the first 2 to 3 weeks we're not teaching at all and we're just engaging with our students, getting to know our students, building an environment that feels really safe and wonderful and fun, and just creating a space for them where they know that they're safe and good to come in and secure in that environment every day. That would be the first thing. I think the second thing would be to definitely give them the freedom that I had. And I think some teachers, when they come out of their preparation programs, are afraid to do that. I didn't really have a choice. I was just like, here you go. This is your space. Do with it what you will. But encourage them to tap into that creativity and really, your students, especially if you spend that time to really intentionally get to know them and foster that relationship in the building in the beginning. Have the courage to be creative and set down the things that are not serving your students in the way that you thought that they would. So I think that would be two. Let's see.
Okay, and I'm just going to reiterate here. The first one is about the affective domain. It's the importance of the emotions of the students to make sure that they feel comfortable and safe, because otherwise learning doesn't go in. And the second one is about competences, and competence is a word that's big in Europe and it's a little less common in the States, but competences is about more social skills and the skills they'll need outside of school. So you're definitely focused on that. So now the third one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to like pinpoint just. I think collaboration is huge. And I think seeing opportunities where you can work with not just co-teachers in the same grade, but what can look up at the grade above you? What are they doing? What's happening in their curriculum? And where could you kind of pull your groups together? Or even looking up, we were pretty good about that at the school that I was at, because a lot of the curriculum would spiral, and something that you would touch on third grade, they would touch on again in sixth grade. And you could bring those students together for really interesting learning experiences. So I think just not being afraid to teach outside your four walls and really interact with the rest of the grade levels and the student population in your school.
And to perhaps bring the community into the classroom and the classroom into the community.
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this beautiful. You're really good at spontaneous answers, so I'm very impressed. Okay, the second one is because you've had such positive experience with parents, and I love it because it's not common. It's not the norm. I wish it were. What if you were in charge of the initiation of parents into any type of school? It doesn't matter what type of school. What would you want the parents to know? What would you recommend? How would you recommend their attitude towards the teachers be? What are 3 things you would introduce to help the collaboration between the teachers and the parents?
Some sort of initiative where the parents, I don't know exactly what it would look like, but where the parents would know that I, as an administrator, back my teachers. I support them. I trust in them. They are competent. They are certified. They are qualified. So I have their back, and I'm going to encourage you as parents to also have their back and trust in them. And it's hard in the beginning to just hand your baby over to somebody you don't know, but try to start with trust and just an openness. I think secondly, if I'm an administrator, do not come to me first. Go to them first. If you CC me on an email or if you call me, I need to know that you've already had communication with them before you try to fly it up the flagpole to get the attention, because I don't feel like those are ever constructive conversations. The parents are just angry and they just want to go over the teacher's head. And then you're pulling an admin in who has no idea what's going on, and it's not a good position for them either. And I think third, I don't know. Just encouraging parents to help support their teachers. One, by demonstrating respect for the teachers at home so that their children are seeing it. Because it's really hard as a teacher to hold a space, and I don't want to use authority is not the right word, but it is a bit of authority. If there's no respect for the teacher and that at home and the child's picking up on that, the child's going to bring that into the classroom as well. So I think just really encouraging parents to uplift the teachers and promote a positive attitude towards their teachers. I would say our school that my daughter is at does a really, really great job of, hey, it's Teacher Appreciation Week, which it is this week. Here's what your teachers love. And they have like a list of, here are their favorite things. Here, if you want to uplift your teacher in a certain way, here's how you can do it, and providing opportunities to get engaged with your teacher, get involved, and just show them, hey, I appreciate what you're doing, because we all know teachers are doing a lot, and a lot of them are doing a lot and not making a lot on top of it, and pouring their whole hearts into their classroom and your children every day. So just helping to support them, I think, would be huge.
Okay, so I love that, because what you're saying is a teacher, I mean, the studies show, and my experience as well, that we can always counterbalance what's happening in the home. And if there's a lack of respect for educators in the home, we can still establish a foundation of respect. It's just much more challenging. So if the parents can send their children to school with the assumption that the teacher is respected, then everything becomes easier. If the underlying foundation is that we want our children to learn in school, then that's what we want to do. We want to help create the environment, even before they walk into the classroom, that where they're going is somewhere that their parents value, it's a priority for them, and that they're going to support the teacher. They're going to be their child's best advocate. There's no question, but that they respect the teacher as well. The assumption is on respect instead of disrespect. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I will say too, being in a charter school is an interesting environment because, when you're kind of in the public school funnel, it's just, here I am, kindergarten through 12th grade, I'm riding the train the whole way through. But when you're in a charter school, it's a choice to send your child there. And then giving the parents the opportunity to examine, is this the best fit for us and our family? And if it is, fantastic. We'd love to have you. But if it's not, that's okay too. And we wish you well. And I hope you find something that fits better for you and your needs. And it's not a personal decision. You have to do what you feel is right for your family. So I think empowering the parents as well in a mature way to really examine the needs that they have and if those needs are being met in the way that they had hoped.
Okay, so Shannon, what I'd like to end with is for a little bit of an explanation of the business that you're just starting, because it's such a natural transition. You speak with such compassion and such love of the children that you taught, and even the families that those children came from. And what you're doing now is simply a natural transition into honoring the mothers. So could you explain a little bit about this business?
So I was a high achiever, good student. School was relatively easy for me. And I carried that into my adulthood. And I was always trying to like chase after whatever the gold star was. And when I had both my daughters, when I worked for this company that I just was laid off from in the spring or in February. But coming back from maternity leave was so hard. It was so hard because I was still trying to be the A+ employee. And then I was trying to be an A+ mom. And especially with your first baby, you can prepare all you want, but at the end of your hospital stay, they hand you your baby and say, good luck, you got this, you're fine, don't worry. So you're readjusting to all of that, and then your identity shifts and you're juggling all of these things. And I totally got lost. I lost myself in the process. And it was really hard to even come to terms with that when I'm like, I've always had this facade of having it all together. And all of a sudden I don't have it together. And I'm trying to maintain this facade and trying to still be a good employee and trying to learn how to be a mother. And I'm lost. And I hit a wall. It took me almost a year, but I did completely hit a wall. And I think if there was more support built in, or if someone had taught me to build some support systems in, that I would have transitioned better overall. And I just have so much compassion for moms, especially new moms, because it is such a huge adjustment. And if you're working on top of it, and a lot of us are very career oriented and in love with our careers, it's hard to juggle a new baby, your career, that's your baby. And then you've got a spouse and you've got a household. There's just so many things to keep spinning, the plate's spinning in the air at any given time. And just recognizing your needs as the person, not even the mom, not even the title of your job, but the person first. What are your needs? Just the same way as when our kids come into our classroom. Are they fed? Do they feel safe? Are they rested? You can't do the things. They can't learn if those things are not met. And as moms, we're frequently running on empty, and just really teaching new moms how to kind of fill their cups first. Then some of those other pieces will feel a bit easier.
Okay, so your proposal is once the mother leaves the hospital is for you to work to collaborate with her to coach. Is it a coaching system that you're proposing?
So it's a program that I think anyone could take anytime during a pregnancy, or even if they know they're going to be pregnant in the future. We'll touch on how to determine how much leave to take and how to fund that leave, because it can be very hard in America to find paid leave. But I don't want that to be a deterrent to people not taking the time to recover from pregnancy, labor, and delivery, and then learning how to mom. So creating a plan there, creating a plan to transition your workload before you leave so that you don't have to think about it and just know that it's in good hands. And then putting supports in place so that when you are on maternity leave, that you've got someone. We have a hard time with a village, I think, in America. They say you need a village, and we don't have a village. So trying to create a village. Let's look, okay, can your mother-in-law come over and help you with laundry once a week? Or can your neighbor walk your dog every Thursday? Things like that. Let's really critically analyze what resources we have around us and put those in place so that on our maternity leave, we're building that into place so that when we do step back into work and we're going to create a transition plan for reentry, we've got some support, because that's when it really, like, the rubber meets the road. You got the baby, you've got the job, you're stepping back in, and you've been out for 6 weeks, 12 weeks longer. And then you're caring for yourself in the process and making an actual deliberate attempt daily to take care and be mindful of your own needs.
Okay, so just as that you created a really positive structure in your classroom, what you're proposing is to be very proactive and positive about your time as a mother into this new identity. Because, I'm not a mother, but I've heard, and I have two sisters who are mothers, you do lose your identity. And if you're not proactive about it, then the things that you're most passionate about, aside from this new beautiful baby, is lost, that you're not able to give to your child if you're not being really conscious about it.
Right. Yeah, it's better for everybody if you are full and whole first.
This is absolutely fascinating. I would love to leave some links so people can contact you. All right. You've given so many insightful experiences as a teacher, so many insightful perspectives as a parent and a teacher. And I'm really looking forward to people hearing this. So I thank you so much for all your time and generous sharing.
Thanks, Donna. It's been a lot of fun. It's been fun to dip back into my experience, because I feel like once an educator, always an educator. It never really leaves you. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome.
So that's the end of this remarkable educational adventure that Shannon has shared with us. If students are lucky, she'll go back into the classroom. But in the meantime, her daughters have the advantage of daily access to her ongoing and seamless lessons at home. You can find more conversations that will pique your interest, just like this one with Shannon, at Doodles with Donna, and free activities that you can use at home and in your classroom at scaffoldingmagic.com. See you soon here for more conversations that help make education all over the world more transparent, and have fun in your classroom and at home. See you soon.